Let's take a look at your warm-up. I'll work out problem 1, you guys do 2 and 3. For warm-up number 1, you have a proportion. 4/20ths equals x 70ths. All you have to do to solve this is cross multiply. In other words, 20 times x, 20x, equals 4 times 70, 280. Divide both by 20, and you end up with x equals 14. Now you try. Remember, for two polygons to be similar, they must have congruent corresponding angles and proportional corresponding sides. Now let's talk about triangles. If two triangles have two corresponding angles that are congruent, they automatically are similar. Let's take a look at the first example in your worksheet. I have two triangles here. The first triangle is this smaller one, ADE, and the second triangle is the larger one, ABC. Now, I labeled them with letters to make it easier for us. Whenever I'm looking to see if two triangles are similar, I need to check to make sure that they have at least two angles that are congruent. For triangles only, if the two angles are congruent, then they're automatically similar. Notice these lines, they have those arrows. That means that these are really parallel lines. And they're being cut, line DE and line BC, by two transversals. I have one transversal AB going this way, which forms this angle D and this angle B. And it's easy to see that these two angles are corresponding. And in a parallel cut by transversal situation, corresponding angles are always congruent. So angle D is congruent with angle B. Now let's look at the other transversal, which is AC, and it forms angle E right here and angle C right here. Again, for the same exact reason, angle C is congruent with angle E, which means that at least two of the angles in this triangle are exactly the same. And actually, angle A is in both triangles, so this one is also the same. So therefore, these are definitely similar triangles. Now that I know that all of the angles are the same and that the angles are similar, that the triangles are similar, I can actually set it up as a proportion. I'm going to want this side, AD, and it's going to be, I'm thinking because of my proportionality, it's going to be proportional. So AD over AB is going to be proportional to AE over AC. Now, AD and AE are both 8. AB is 8 plus the 10, 18. I don't need to go any further because 8 over 18 is equal to 8 over 18. So therefore, this also satisfies the part of my theory that says that I need to have these also be proportional. So my corresponding sides are proportional, my corresponding angles are congruent. These two triangles are definitely similar. This is example 2. In example 2, you have two figures. They're both rectangles. The first thing we need to check is whether corresponding angles are congruent. Now that's pretty easy in this case because, look, they're all 90-degree angles. That's what these little squares mean. So since all the angles are 90 degrees, they're all congruent. They all measure exactly the same. That means that the first part of my similarity theory is completely proven. Now we need to see if the corresponding sides are also proportional. If the corresponding sides are proportional, then these two figures will be similar. Now, if I have to compare these two, I need to mentally shift this one that is vertical, make it horizontal, or this one that is horizontal and make it vertical. I'm going to go that route. I'm going to take my horizontal one and make it vertical, That means P would be here, Q would be here, R would be here, and S would be here. Make sense? QP I know measures 6 units, and QR I know measures 12 units. So now that I've shifted this around, it's easy for us to see what the corresponding sides are. AB corresponds to PQ, and BC corresponds to QR. In other words, 8 over 6 equals 5 over 12. This is a proportion, and proportions mean cross multiplication. So I'm going to cross multiply these. 8 times 12, 96, and 6 times 5, 30. 96 is not the same as 30. These are not proportional. Because these are not proportional, the two figures are not similar. Now these triangles are interesting. If we look at the corresponding angles, we would have to have 70 degrees be congruent with 65 degrees. That's not true. Therefore, since these two do not have two angles that are corresponding, that are congruent, these two triangles are not similar. Now you try example number 4. So here's the answer to example number 4. If you did it correctly, you realize that first of all, comparing angles, all the angles were 90 degrees, so therefore all the angles were congruent. That's part 1 of my similarity test. Part 2 of the test, let's find out if the sides are proportional. Side AB corresponds to side PQ. Side BC corresponds to side QR. So therefore, 3 over 1.5 equals 15 over 7.5. Cross multiply. 3 times 7.5 is 22.5. 15 times 1 5/10 is 22 5/10. Yes, the proportions are the same. Yes. Let's skip the next one and go straight to the last problem on your example sheet. Anne's rectangular room is 10 by 12. I drew that one. She did a sketch of a room that was 8 by 10. Now notice, I had two measurements, 8 and 12 for the room and 8 and 10 for the sketch. I decided that 8 had to go on this side because it corresponds to this 10, which is the smaller of the two measurements. That means that 10 had to go on this one to correspond with this 12, which was the bigger measurement. Now, we're doing feet to inches, so we have to do a little bit of conversion. So we know that every foot is 12 inches, so 10 feet times my 12 inches. That means that here I actually have 120 inches, and here I actually have 144 inches. And now I can actually figure out if these two figures are similar. Here's the thing. Because they're all rectangles, all my angles are 90 degrees, so automatically the first part of my test is correct. All the angles are going to be congruent because all the angles are 90 degrees. So now let's just check these these sides for proportionality. 120 is going to correspond to 8, and 144 is going to correspond to 10. 120 times 10 is 1200, and 144 times 8 is 1152. So 1200 is definitely not the same as 1152. Therefore, our friend Anne made a mistake. This is not similar. Alright, so now let's get to how we use our similarity theories to allow us to find missing sides on our polygons. Let's assume that rectangle ABCD is similar to rectangle QRPS. AB corresponds to QP, just like BC corresponds to QR. Because I know that these correspond to each other, I can replace it with the actual values. 8 units for AB, 6 units for QP, X for BC, and 12 for QR. Now, I've set up my proportion. I know that this is true because these two, they're telling me that these two are similar, so I can go ahead and set them up as a proportion. Now all I do is cross multiply. 8 times 12 is 96, and 6 times x is 6x. Now I divide everything by 6, and I end up with 16 equals x. So that 16 units is my missing measurement. You guys go ahead and try 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I will show the answers in a moment. So those last couple of problems were a little difficult. But why do I care? I care about these similarity problems because they allow me to solve problems like this. Say, for example, I have a tree of unknown height, and from a point, I know that that tree is 24 feet from that point. I also know there's a 5-foot person standing 8 feet from that point. And I know that this triangle formed by the person, the 8 feet, and my point is similar to the triangle formed by the tree, the 24 feet. Because they're similar, how do I know that they're similar? Well, this is going to be a 90-degree angle here. We're going to assume that's a 90-degree angle here. They share that angle here. And we know that if a triangle has 2 congruent angles, then the 2 triangles are similar. So therefore, the big triangle with this angle and this angle being congruent to the little triangle with this angle and this angle, these shapes must be similar. So now all I need to do is say, well, my tree, I'm hoping, is going to be proportional to my person, and my distance of the tree is going to be proportional to the distance of the person. Cross multiply once I set up my proportion. That gives me 8x equals 24 times 5, 128. Divide everything by 8. 8 equals 15. X equals 15. So my tree is 15 feet high. So you guys go ahead and work on the other 2 sheets, whatever you don't finish in class.